Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we will be looking at how Dan McMeekin was allegedly put in the boot of Jonny'S car after making a mistake with a text message. Also, how did John George get Johnny Smyth'S watch? So the first thing we are going to look at is how Dan McMeekin apparently sent a text message to Michael Maley by mistake and ended up in the boot of Johnny Smyth'S car.
I'm pretty convinced that is a bullet mark. There's people in the box, but I don't know why. So I'm going to do a... Yeah, so I think, Sharice, that it's been like... I think that's definitely a bullet mark there. Yes, anyone confused about why Dan was in the boot? I've talked about this several times, and I spoke about this way before I even started speaking to Dan. On the day that, so I'll explain it. On the day that John George was killed, Dan at some point was at the Abbey Tavern pub, and he was crying. He had just found out apparently that. Why are you afraid, Irene? He just found out that that he was Ricochet. Good point, Nikki. He just found out that John George had been killed. He was crying. He was in bits. People in the pub were noticing, and he went to text a woman back in Belfast to say that John George had been killed, and he had actually sent it to Michael Maley instead, who was with Johnny, in which case he was picked up from the pub, beaten really severely, really badly, and then he was drove to the hospital in the car. Dawn so Dawn actually, oh hey Darren, Dawn and the grandfather cleaned him up and said he wasn't allowed to go to the hospital until they'd cleaned him up properly. You're afraid because you're typing to me. I don't really get it, Irene. You're really clingy. No. So they drove him to the hospital in the boot of the car. And when they left him at the hospital, it was at that point they took his passport off him. Yes, Dan does confirm that. They took his passport off him so he could not fly back to Belfast and tell the family what he knew. Which is why... Are these Dan's pick? No.
So what are the chances that Dan tried to message someone who's back in Belfast about the John George murder, and he accidentally sends it to Michael Maley instead? This sounds like a very big coincidence, and I don't know where Haley got this information from, but it sounds like Dan made a very big mistake. Now, Haley talks about Dan apparently crying because he found out that John had been murdered. But if we quickly go back to when Madison spoke about Dan crying in a bar, she says that he was crying because he had just found out that his nan passed away.
And why was Johnny sitting in the wee bar crying, letting on his granddad died?
That was Dan.
That was Dan?
Yeah, Dan rang me crying, saying his nanny died, and went he didn't need him.
What did Michael say when he came in? For them is to shake themselves. What did he want to say?
Well, so his exact words, and what you seen when he walked in the door, he said what?
Right, could I explain what happened?
So was this another lie from Madison? Or was Dan actually crying because he had found out that his family member had passed away, and not that John George was murdered? It's hard to understand, because we are yet to hear Dan McMeekin's full story on what happened. And after his court appearance ended up with Dan getting kicked out for apparently being intoxicated, and he didn't get to sign his statement, I don't even know if that statement will even be used in the case anymore. But let's move on to what Haley says about Dan getting badly beaten up for sending this message to Michael. So apparently Johnny and Michael went and picked Dan up and beat him up, then put him in the boot of the car. I have put a picture up on the screen for you to see, because this is from when Dan was found in Johnny's apartment by John George's family, and it does look like Dan has a mark on his face. Could this be from when Johnny and Michael beat him up? Because it does look like he has been attacked or got involved in a physical altercation. Apparently, Dan's passport was taken off him after this happened as well, so maybe that was why Dan was in Johnny Smyth'S apartment when the George family entered. Because he had nowhere to go? And maybe Johnny was trying to frame Dan for this murder. Not only that, but allegedly Johnny's mom and granddad helped clean Dan McMeekin up before he was taken to hospital. If Dan had to go to hospital, then this attack on Dan would have had to be very violent. The next thing we're going to take a look at is that John George was wearing Johnny Smith's watch in his last video, but how did he get it?
Finding it for his mate. I don't know, truth set free. You tell me. You seem to know a lot. So one thing we can confirm now is that the watch that John is wearing in that video is Jonny's watch, because I have a picture of both of them wearing the same watch. Now, so I asked Dan McMeekin when the video came from, where he's clutched his leg saying, I've been stabbed, I've been stabbed, I've been stabbed. Again, you know, when he's joking that we played last night when he's doing the balloons. He says that was taken from the night of the Tyson fight, so it had been before John George even got there. I would like to see it dated, personally, because I'd like to, you know, I can't take anything for granted in this case. But I did ask. Yeah, that's why I think it's, so that's it on John George's wrist. And that's it on Jonny's wrist. It just seems really strange that you would like let anyone wear your watch. Who did John George send the video to you with the hat and the watch on? Where he sat there, the first video that was ever released when people were like, oh my god, he's missing. We don't believe it was sent to anyone. We believe that if it was sent to anyone, it was sent to Jonny. And then Madison released it. Because during the beginning, when the family were kind of... Tyson fight was the 21st of December.
So Haley has shown us that John George is seen wearing Johnny Smith's watch, and I'm wondering how he actually has the watch in the first place. If you remember when Johnny Smith sent messages about John not giving back his Canada Goose, he didn't mention anything about the watch, which is obviously more expensive than a coat. So it makes me think there might be more to this watch situation than it looks. Could it be possible that John had taken the watch off Johnny because they had an argument, rather than Johnny actually giving it to him? Because I believe that Johnny would have definitely mentioned that John George had his watch, especially if he's going to talk about John not giving back his coat. Maybe this had something to do with John George getting attacked, and the watch might be involved. We also have to think about the fact that Johnny apparently let John borrow his Canada Goose, so he could have let him borrow the watch as well. What do you guys think about this watch situation? Because I think there could definitely be more to it than we think. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, and we will update you as we find out more.